Bore da pawb a croeso gynnes iawn i'r Bwrdd Addysg a Gwella Cymru. Good morning to you all and welcome to the board meeting today. We've just come out of an in-committee meeting under section 1.2 of the Public Bodies Act 1960. I have apologies for absence for John Gammon, an independent member who was unable to attend the meeting in person, and James Sadgrove, another independent member. Are there any declarations of interest that need to be declared today that are pertinent to today's agenda, but not on the register? No, thank you very much. And I just need to give you the heads up that we will be taking agenda item 3.3 at the end of the meeting to enable one of the presenters to attend. So with that, I'm now going to go into the draft minutes of the board meeting held on the 30th of November 2023. So first of all, for accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Are you happy that that's an accurate record of the meeting? Yes. Thank you very much. I'm now going to go to the action log from the board meeting held on the 30th of November. So, David, can you tell me if all the action logs are complete?
So all either complete on today's agenda or incomplete.
Thank you very much. So going back to the minutes of the board, I want to take matters arising now that are not on today's agenda or not covered by the action log. So page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Are you content for me to sign these minutes off?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to part 2 now, agenda item 2.1, the chair's report. Now, I know this is the highlight of everybody's day. I focused really in this report on culture and leadership. I want to say right up front that today is the last board meeting as independent members for Ruth and Tina. And I want to put on record our thanks, appreciation and respect for the huge contribution that these two members have made to this organisation. They've been here since the inception and the establishment, and they have both played a huge role in developing our Education, Commissioning and Quality Committee. And Ruth has also been a vice chair on whom I've been able to rely and have some really interesting and challenging conversations. But she has always brought wise counsel. The other thing about Ruth I want to absolutely appreciate upfront is a determination to learn the Welsh language. A mae'n bleser mawr I weld beth sydd wedi ginio yn hon. Tina, her interest in people and her interest in the outcomes for our students, together with her knowledge and influencing, has been a really great member of this board. So I'd just like to say, diolch o galon I ti. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And we wish you well, health and happiness going forwards. I'm pleased to report that the process of having 2 new independent members join us is now complete. The Minister has appointed 2 new board members for us, Dawn Jones and Judith Hardesty, and they will be joining us shortly over the next couple of months. And we'll very much look forward to their input. I need to make some changes, of course, to the committees, and whilst we've taken some through initially through the board in November, I want to confirm that Jill will be the vice chair from the 1st of February, and that she will stand down as chair of Audit and Assurance Committee. And again, I'd like to put note on record that Jill has led the creation of this committee since the inception and establishment of HAW, and I'm very grateful for that, and I very much look forward to working with you as our vice chair. The audit committee will be chaired going forwards from the 1st of February by James Agored, and I'd like you to approve that, please. Thank you very much. I just come to really 2 things. One is to remind everybody of the challenging circumstances that we find ourselves working in the NHS and public service in Wales, and our determination to support the care delivery for the population of Wales through ensuring a vibrant workforce. We all know that public service finances are a real challenge, and at this time, the issue of leadership is really fundamental, and I would like to highlight the fact that today we'll be signing the pledge for us behaving, delivering, enhancing, and making sure that we spread the message for compassionate leadership. And at the end of today's meeting, we will formally sign that pledge. I want to draw your attention, and I think this is a change in the way I want to do my chair's report going forwards. I want to draw your attention to the risk register, which, although it's right at the end of the corporate risk register, right at the end of today's agenda, I'm bringing it forward because I think it actually gives you a snapshot of where our focus is on this organisation in mitigating risk. Apart from that, I think the report is what it is. Happy to take any questions, but I'm sure Daddy will answer them if any issues. With that, I'd like to hand over to Alex for your Chief Exec's report.
So the board have got the Chief Exec stuff today, but there are a couple of things that I just need to draw your attention to and update you on. So first of all, and with the first item, HAW plans, we were hoping that by today we would be able to confirm that we have got an agreement on our education and training plan for 24-25, but unfortunately that is not the case, and so we had hoped to bring that plan to the board today so that we could start to communicate with our stakeholders and partners and initiate the commissioning process with our universities, but we are unable to do that, hence the chair's reference to the red risk on the corporate risk register. Obviously, we're trying to manage that situation to mitigate any impact on how we might be able to recruit and fill those places next year, and we'll continue to do so. But I think we should recognise as a board the impact that this has had on our staff, who have had to do a lot of extra work and are holding quite a lot of additional pressure in terms of deadlines approaching and demands from our partners for information and clarification as well as our university partners who obviously are waiting to have confirmation of the report numbers for next year's commissioning round. So we are really grateful to all of them for their continued support and cooperation, and we'll obviously continue to work with Welsh Government to resolve this as quickly as possible. But it does represent a regular.
Can I just ask a question on that? From being the chair of the education and commissioning, we're well aware of the additional work that it's caused to the staff here in order to work with universities to increase the commissioning rates that were requested last year. The additional work for any delay the Welsh Government might have in making the decisions actually will accentuate that year on year, and therefore the impact that has also across students actually who might want to come to Wales means that they're more likely to take up posts in Scotland and in England, and therefore we lose that capacity. And I think the timeline involved, and I know you're aware of this, but I think it's important to have it on record from an ECQC agenda that the timeliness of giving opportunities, because we hold university to account contracting processes, that it's, we're not put in the unenviable position of the board to actually listen to the additional work that has to be put in place to enable the university then to meet the targets based on the delay that comes forward. And I just wonder that if that's been put forward to the Welsh Government, that they understand the impact on the workforce and also the subsequent students who may be looking to come in to train across the professional group.
I feel that we have flagged all of the potential risks and some of those indirect implications of the current delay. Ultimately, you know, we've never been in this position before, so some of these are going to be new areas for us to really understand as we go into next year, and to manage as best we can, depending on what that the outcome of that plan is. But I do think that we have been quite clear since July about the timelines that were underpinning the academic cycle in terms of universities, but also the national recruitment cycle that we are part of as well.
Thanks.
Carry on.
Yes.
So just looking over to the plan change to the executive team. So the board are aware of the plan to create a new role, and I'm really grateful for my executive team colleagues for their support and cooperation in helping with this. And you know, we are really looking forward to having a new member of the team who can increase our capacity in that particular area, linked to what we've already said. This is obviously a key part of our functions, but also I think in particular provide Lisa with more time and capacity to focus on the nursing and, you know, huge OHP and healthcare science agenda, and psychology as well, and quality that will sit within your area. But that's obviously something that we hope to have achieved by the end of Q1 in 24-25 to support the implementation of our IMTP for next year, which Lynn will update you on shortly. The we've had two important letters this week, so hopefully if you haven't already had them, Kath is in the process of sharing with our independent members the letter as a result of our JET meeting with Welsh Government, which was constructive, and also a letter to tell us that we are in routine escalation status. We remain in routine escalation status. Obviously, you know, other organisations have similar letters this week as well. We've been doing a lot of regular meetings with people, as you can see. Just to note that we've also met with Health Inspection Wales this week, Lisa and myself, and the sort of auspices of the developing quality strategy, which was a really helpful meeting, and you know, particularly thinking about how we do share intelligence and insights to help people mitigate any issues and risks that are going on in the system, but focus on that improvement. So I'm hoping to bring that quality strategy forward to the board in March. I'm going to end on two areas of good news. One being that yesterday through the really hard work of people in Glyn's and Lisa's team. In particular, we had the first endoscopy training session in the new facility that we have been procuring from, or working with capital use in the Keir Hardy site. So the first training was undertaken there. So obviously that was our key concern in relation to the transition from the WEMAT unit in Cardiff University. So that's fantastic. And the other piece of good news, I will let Sian detail because I didn't allow her to announce this in the staff forum last week because you were running out of time. So I let her do it today.
You sure?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sean. Next.
Following the business case and procurement process for a single platform, we're really pleased to announce that Welsh Government has approved the funding requested, and we had confirmation of that last week. And we're now finalising the procurement process and looking forward to working with a commercial partner to take forward the new builds. And the team are really excited and grateful for all the support that has got.
It's really good news. Thank you, Sean. I'm sure we'll be very excited to see what impact it's going to have and how it works through. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the Chief Exec report? Okay, thank you very much.
I have got a question. I've just got a comment really, which is to say how much I welcome the changes to the executive team membership, particularly the appointment of the new education director and the rebalancing the reasons we can give more time to these. I think the focus on strategy in the context of education is just crucially important for us. Something that maybe we've come to a point where we're able to do that, having processes and development in place, associated transformation of leadership elements that would be really valuable. That's something I want to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm now going to go on to strategic matters. So agenda item 3.1. Diagnostics workforce plan, and you're going to present this.
I am, because Dorothy Edwards, who's been using this work, is actually at a genomics event with the genomics team, and so has delegated this to me. She's taking a great risk here, and I just thought I would it's only a very short slide set, don't worry, I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint, but I'm conscious that we haven't had a chance to bring this to a specific or briefing session. So I thought it'd just be useful to just bring this to life a little bit outside of the paper. So Fiona is going to very artfully move us on to the next slide, I think. So this is a bit of a composite slide, which is not about the diagnostic workforce plan in particular, but just, I suppose, gives you an overview and reminds us really of the context for the strategic workforce plan. So obviously, on the top left-hand side, we've got the very well-known diagram that we use to represent the workforce strategy, which looked forward for us for 10 years up until 2030, and put forward 7 themes and associated actions that we felt were evidence-based, responded to engagement, and really gave us those really important clips to take through the workforce in NHS Wales. And we very much use that as a framework to underpin the strategic workforce plans. And the way that we've developed the strategic workforce plans, as the board will be aware, is this kind of probably quite simplistic really, but 3-pillar methodology where we take the workforce data and insights that we can glean from what current work looks like and what some of the issues are with the current workforce. We do the engagement phase, and sometimes we do a consultation phase as well, with not just the staff involved, but many people and stakeholders of the system. And then we do the research and evidence analysis phase, which is looking at the bigger picture. What are other people doing? What's coming over the horizon? And really, if we sometimes we only look to this sort of point of the curve, but who are the people in the think tanks that are looking even further into the future? And from that, we aim to develop a plan which gives us a concrete set of actions, some costs and some timelines. Now, we know that they are inevitably focused on the short to medium term at the moment, because we don't necessarily have the opportunity of that longer term service strategy and plan as a bedrock for this, and we don't have the mandate for a long-term workforce plan as has been produced in England. The table at the bottom just gives you a little bit of an update on where we are with the other plans, and we often talk about the need to make sure these are interrelated, and that is definitely, you know, a key job of us in HEOW, because we do tend to work with lots of different partners on these. So primary care, you're well aware, we've worked very closely with the strategic programme for primary care. On mental health, we've traditionally worked with the mental health network. And so, you know, it is really important that within HEOW we make the connections between all of these plans. And you'll be familiar with all of these in various stages of their development. But for me, it's really important for us to just take stock of this, I think, and really understand why we're doing these plans, because you know, for me, this is really about how this is the vehicle for embedding those really important themes and actions from the workforce strategy into our workforce solutions and priorities for those professions and those service areas. And it gives us a consistent framework, which means that we can make things coherent where perhaps in the past they've been very fragmented. So this was certainly the rationale for the nursing one, where we knew that lots of bits of the picture were going on all across the system, but there was no front of the jigsaw box in terms of how the sort of whole piece needed to come together. So for us, this is also about, you know, bringing together what has previously been probably you know, fragmented and unconnected work into a coherent framework. It is also a vehicle for directing and corralling what we do in HEOW, because obviously a lot of our functions are supporting those themes in the workforce strategy. So having a plan in those areas helps us make sure we can put our resources where they need to be, and to refocus them where necessary, but also to make more economies of the things we've got. So a good example of that would be things like Careersville and Train Work Live, where through the development of these additional plans, we've been able to build on existing pieces of work, tweak and redirect them when necessary. And, you know, ultimately, for me, this is a mechanism to shift the dial on developing a sustainable workforce. And, you know, I think one of the things we always say is that we know that these plans are not a panacea for a sustainable workforce. They don't solve all of the problems, but they do help us shift that dial. The downsides are, as I said, you know, they do tend to have a more short to medium term focus, because we don't have the intelligence really about that longer term view of what models of care might be at the moment. And the second sort of issue is obviously, particularly at the moment, we may not always get the investment that we would like to support these plans. You know, we've been really fortunate in some of them, like mental health, to go into this scenario. Obviously, we've got to be more cognizant about the financial context we're working within, and make sure that we're mitigating both of those risks in how we develop our implementation plans, using a very robust approach to prioritisation, to what we call the bronze, silver, gold approach, which is essentially option appraisals on how we do these things. And also, you know, as I said before, looking really closely at how we're using our existing resources. So I presented this slide to the chief execs this week before we were talking about the primary care one, because I just think it's helpful for people to not see these in isolation and to see them as a vehicle to shift that dial, as they keep saying, in the right direction, even though we might not know all the answers to all of those things I just talked about, really. So Fiona, can we bring them on to the next slide? Thank you. So for diagnostic services, I don't think I need to labour the case for change here. We know that this is a huge bottleneck for our cancer and plan services, as well as obviously many other services across the system, including the primary care and urgent and emergency care. And in and amongst that, there are some major equipment, digital and workforce challenges. And we were asked by the diagnostics programme to support the development of some workforce solutions in 2022. And again, similarly to the way we've worked with the strategic programme for primary care, we've worked closely with them to undertake this work. Now, in this instance, diagnostics is an umbrella term for imaging, endoscopy, pathology, and also genomics, actually. And so we were already working with those programmes, doing pieces of workforce development. So one of the key things we've been able to do through this plan is to align that, because again, it was very much sort of a pick and mix approach, not connected, not as consistent as it needed to be. And so we've been able to really bring that into alignment through this piece of work. This is definitely an area where we've only been able to take a relatively short-term focus, because there is an awful lot of change at the moment in the system, particularly around regional models of delivery, but they aren't clear yet. Particularly around the implementation of digital solutions. There's an awful lot of work going on digital solutions for pathology and radiology, and a request for more to happen around digital pathology, cellular pathology as well. And clearly this is an area where we know the genomics field is going to impact as well. So there's advances in technologies. So in a way, you know, we do have to balance that. What do we need to do to get on with things? What are the known knowns that we can work on, and then but also recognise what are some of those unknown knowns that we need to be just keeping our plans flexible for really as we move forward. And I've mentioned the financial context already. Next slide, please, Fiona. Can you just click again just to get the diagram up, please? Thank you very much. So I don't need to labour this point. You know the methodology. And you know, we have engaged significantly across all of those modalities in the system, and we have had we actually invited Alison Leary in to speak to those events back in the spring last year, because she, in her work as part of one of the London universities, had been doing a publication with Moondance on diagnostic services for cancer care. So it was really useful to get some of her expertise into the process as well. So the process has been as you would have expected with our other plans. If you move on to the next slide, Fiona. But one of the things that was really helpful in this instance was there had already been a really comprehensive review of diagnostics in England by Mike Richards. So the Richards report was already there for us. So we knew we had a really good blueprint, if you like, to base our work on, where you know he has got a set of workforce recommendations that you can see there. And so we weren't really starting from scratch at all. So we knew the direction of travel. Because he'd already, in a sense, done a lot of the job for us, and really we will be building on that as part of this process. So if you move on to the next slide, please, Fiona. So without wading through every single action in the plan, these are just a couple of the ones that I just thought would be useful to draw attention to. So we've discussed at a board development session previously our plans around developing the clinical academy models across Wales. And this is a key area where you know, the Richards report, the Welsh Government Diagnostic Strategy, and our own work aligns very well to say that that model would be beneficial. So we've just heard about the endoscopy work that we're taking forward in Keir Hardy, and that is the first sort of phase, if you like, of developing what we see as that endoscopy clinical academy across Wales, and that is something that's part of our IMTP for the next year. We really want to trailblaze with, and we're also in discussions with the pathology programme around a digital approach to a pathology academy, really supported by Bwrdd as well. So this process helped really reinforce the fact that we already thought we needed to do that, but this has helped us sort of get that embedded in the plan that has been supported by stakeholders across the system. We've got, you know, when we've looked at the Richards report and had the discussions with staff, there are lots of different ways in which we need to reshape the profile of the workforce. So one is around advanced and extended and enhanced practice, and so the publication that Lisa's team issued last summer is very much now about, you know, how do we use that in diagnostic services to really stretch the people that we've got and give them those opportunities for career development and progression. We've also got a developing and evolving NDT workforce, and you know, one of the key actions, one of the key requests was, you know, can we have some guidance on how those workforce models come together and how they relate in different diagnostic services, particularly thinking about regional models, but also this idea of community diagnostic hubs, and what does that look like, so that everybody's not just reinventing the wheel and thinking about how new roles come together. So that's another key action for us in HCIW. And it's very similar, I think, to the work that we did already on critical care, and looking at, you know, what's the art of the possible with the roles that we have available. There was a huge focus on developing our education infrastructure, so not just in terms of those academies, but thinking about, you know, we know that placement is an obstacle for us in some areas. How do we untap that issue, and also looking at how we use practice education facilitators in some of these fields to support people in those learning environments. So again, there are key actions in there about how we need to do that. Apprenticeships and part-time approaches and work-based learning approaches were, you know, a major area of discussion, and how we can really provide opportunities for people already in the workforce to enter into some of those pathways. And in particular, building on some of the work from the healthcare science programme, which is obviously, I think we had an update on that the last board meeting. And obviously, you know, that programme covers a lot of the professionals that feed into the diagnostic services area. So really linking those pieces of work. Retention, clearly another key issue, but you know, fortunately we didn't have to go back to scratch on this. This is a good example of where we've been able to piggyback on work we're already doing. But the action there will be to roll that out, but also to consider if there are any profession specific or service specific areas that we need to build into that approach for diagnostic services. And then in particular thinking about how we develop the important support workforce and look at, you know, a more consistent approach, particularly to some of those band 4 assistant practitioner roles. And finally, I've mentioned already the different opportunities around education and training. So it's not a sort of a comprehensive list of all the actions that you'll see in my plan, but hopefully a flavour of some of the areas that, building on the work of the Mike Butcher's report, we are now going to be taking forward. And I think for us, it was about really, you know, not necessarily diving into the detail all the time of imaging, endoscopy, and pathology, but doing things that were going to be a benefit across all those modalities to really sort of shift those services forward. So last slide. So where we're at the moment is we actually took that plan. There's a very different architecture now in place in NHS Wales around planned care, cancer and diagnostics. So there's a national board that I sit on. So Dorothy brought this plan to that national board a couple of weeks ago, following consideration at all the other different groups in that system. And there was support for this as a plan, and support for us to work with the diagnostics programme team to develop that implementation plan. You know, there is investment in some areas of planned care, so we do just need to be aware of that. This is, you know, sometimes it goes straight to health boards on a sort of population share basis. So we have flagged with Welsh Government colleagues that whilst we absolutely understand that, there may be some areas where actually investment in some of the workforce issues would give those benefits right across the system. And obviously this is another plan that helps us inform the education and training plan for next year. I've mentioned the clinical skills academy already, but I think this is a real one where clearly, you know, it's really, really obvious that actually this is a point in time. It helps us shift forward, but there's so much change. We just have to, you know, keep light on our feet really to respond to that. Thank you, Fiona.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, slides are very helpful, and the narrative is very complex, isn't it? So, any questions or observations? Jill?
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Alex. I think you did an excellent job for Dorothy.
I don't follow that.
Really welcome this paper. And bringing it all together, I think is really, really helpful. And you say maybe for the first time, seeing it all as one. Each time we get one of these papers, Lisa probably knows what I'm going to say. I always think which professions we've forgotten. You know, have we got a comprehensive list? And we talked about this at the Education Quality and Commissioning Committee about what there's the list of professions. Have we got a workforce plan for each of those? What are we doing in this space and all the rest of it? I always feel like I need that whole piece to see where our gaps are. So really, really welcome this though, but it does trigger that question each time. The second thing, as I was going through it, was the links to the next paper, the AI, and you've mentioned digital a number of times as we're going through and trying to assess how that feeds into it. So it may be that I'll park that until we come on to the AI paper. But again, it prompted me to think about this investment, and whilst we must do these plans and get them ready, the pipeline, the investment, we know is not going to be forthcoming for everything that everybody wants to do. So I guess it was linked to something that I know we thought about at the beginning of HEIW, which is this change in profession, change in models of care. And in order to get the investment, is there something that we don't need, rather than, or can we morph it into a different type of profession so that we get more bang for our buck, almost, because we know we can't keep adding, we're not going to get that investment. And then my third point on this, I guess, was about the academies and economies of scale, and having to have an economy for each health board footprints and all the rest of it. And is there an opportunity to break that mold so we try and be a little bit not disruptive, because that's not quite the word, but to challenge that model, and so to make it easier for cross-boundary thinking and all the rest of it. It is disruptive in a way to sort of stop thinking we've got to have one for each, because
Yeah, and it's and certainly with this area, the idea is to align with the regional models, yeah, not with the health board. Yeah, so there would be sort of three explains across Wales as a principle, but for some it might just be like, you know, maybe we can't duplicate it. So it's not necessarily about a physical facility either. It is about utilising existing facilities. So we know Cumchart are really interested in working with us because some of the new facilities at their disposal. So and then also thinking about how simulation and digital fits into that as well, and other forms. So you're right. Although the primary care one is very much health based, I think certainly it's some of the areas we're talking about in diagnostics, we would want to align with that. Thank you.
Thanks. Some of the areas that I was going to comment on, Jill has already commented on, but I think one or two of the areas still worthy of a couple more points. I think from my perspective, one is we've mentioned AI, and I've put some stuff with regards to AI as well. The other issue is we've heard a lot about robotics in some of the professional services. I just wondered some of the skill sets that have been identified here could actually be put forward. So future proofing this particular series of work patterns, which brings me to the Skills Academy. And when I looked at some of the workforce risks that are demonstrated across the UK, I just wondered whether there could be an update on that, because it talks about people being attracted to London, whereas if you read more recent data, people are leaving London because of the cost of living and renting properties and all of that. So it would be helpful to look at some of the areas where people are domiciled to see whether that capacity, when we're looking at regional, whether regional is the answer or whether there are some other areas for that. And the other thing for me is it's across professions, and I wondered whether the validation and credentialing with regard to the regulation of professional groups has been clearly identified, because it's not depicted within the paper anywhere, especially when we're looking at AI and the significance of people having to adapt to particular ways of working and outcomes. Where are the regulators on this, and where is the public protection element of it? So, and that bit for me was missing from the paper. Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Ruth?
Like others, I'm really pleased to see this paper. The diagnostic, the term diagnostics, and I think it's defined here, includes a bundle of all sorts of stuff, from the stuff that's effectively taken for granted through to stuff that looks so scientific and people don't want to go near it. So there's a whole spectrum, and it's very, some of it is very complex. As a consequence, I think we haven't given it the profile or the attention or the visibility. It isn't understood in the way that it ought to be, according to the value that it provides. It provides huge value in enabling the rest of the system to work. Without it, the rest of the system, much of it will be lost. And it's also got an enormous potential in the context of prevention, which I think is well worth thinking about. So I just wonder if particularly the prevention aspect could be thought about, but also the profile would be this, because it relates to the ability to recruit and retain, which is identified as a problem. The other thing that I just want to mention briefly is at the last meeting I remember a problem in the clinical science element in relation to access to research. And when you look through this, the potential for research amongst the sort of individuals who are likely to be involved is going to be enormous. I think we need to look across the piece about the potential for and the ethical reporting and the access that people are serving in these services who have research achievement.
Yeah, echo everything that our colleagues have said, but and what was very helpful, thank you, Alex, was the way you presented it. As much as when I read it initially, it's that kind of that feeling of slightly short-termism of the sort of 18 to 24 months, but understanding the context that you described, I can probably appreciate why we're doing what we're doing now. However, it does feel that we're almost ready for the next piece of work on it. You know, they don't have to run concurrently because you know, we need to do the next piece of work before we're implementing this. I also had the concerns that were highlighted in the paper about loss to England of staff, and making sure that whatever we're doing that we try and address those issues. And I know for some staff, obviously they can remotely work, can't they? And this is, I think, the London issue was where if they were working remotely but getting London waiting, they can actually do that. So I think that was a key concept. And again, just a small one line within one of the papers was about you know, we recognise exactly what Ruth was saying about the significance of this group of staff in so many guises and so many special skills that they have. And yet there was a line that suggested potentially graduates may be unable to find roles at the end. And again, the tragedy of that when we know the impact that these are supposed to make. So, but a very welcome this thing.
Lisa?
Yes, to picking up on some of those aspects there in terms of the scope of diagnostic workforce. Obviously we're doing that in many other pieces of work actually which contribute to this, and also actually recognising that some of the components that we described it by Alex is actually being taken forward in other areas, but we are matrix working to the retention programme is a very good example, where that was a programme of work that benefits actually a number of the workforce plans that we've got up there. But picking up on actually some of the key issues in terms of regulation and accreditation, that is obviously we've got a healthcare science programme, which, as you say, actually you had that paper come to the last board. That's a very key piece of work that's being taken forward there, not just about the regulation of the individuals working within those services, but obviously the accreditation of the services themselves. So there's a significant amount of work being taken forward under that arena, but it does actually sort of link into this. So we might not have spelled it all out, but actually there are linkages in there as well. Retention, actually I've made a comment on, and I'm picking up on what actually Ruth was saying about research. But I have to say it's programme board this week, and that was actually the very issue, was about actually how these particular staff groups can take forward that research arena. So it's once again, there are lots of other pieces of work actually going on, but actually these comments are really helpful. But it's actually how we actually capture them and actually put them into here, recognising that they are being taken forward. But there's a very significant piece of work actually of linking healthcare scientists into the diagnostic workforce plan as we go forward as well. But that's just a flavour of actually how, yes, that work is going on, but it commented to how we capture actually just thinking all to fit in this. Otherwise, we like to be repeating a number of the programs that we've got going on.
So I think you had some really good comments. I've got 3 questions, I think, that you could use in any of these workforce plans. So to what extent does regulation support the direction of change? I think that's a polite way of asking the question. Yeah. The next one is, and I'm using the language more precisely than just AI, to what extent does machine thinking lead the change? Not support, but lead. And then finally, to what extent have existing structures been assessed as helpful? So the illusion of us holding the strings on lots and lots of balloons means each balloon is full of different heliums. I think it's more fundamental than trying to bring all the bits together. I think we have to describe the bigger balloon when it's and give it something to aim at. So the helpful thing was your very first slide, because that shows how you've got a set of principles. I think you need to develop a set of questions that are going to be core for the future. And how do you utilize different sorts of skill sets that have not been traditionally used? So if you were looking at the sorts of people who are going to be really good at robotic surgery, they're probably going to be people who are excellent at war games. They're going to be people who are not the usual suspects. I've seen 2 big changes in my lifetime that I could never have believed. One is when I went to Uganda, I couldn't believe they didn't have telephones. They all had mobile phones. They'd never had telephones. So you can actually envisage a future without the past having to be sort of gone through. You can make that leap. And the other one is much more significant and nasty, in that actually the way that the war has been promulgated in Iraq, with Russia, is being driven by technologies, and people are sitting there sending drones up that have a huge and massive effect on traditional armed forces. So I think it's really important doing this work that we enable the future workforce to be very adaptive, and therefore the rich mix of sorts of people that are not the traditional sorts coming in is really key. So to what extent do we need a different form of training, a different selection process of people from coming in from many diverse backgrounds into what is a very traditionalized educational structure and professional regulation? So I think there's some really big questions in here. And of course, not how much capital is needed to actually enable people to have the machinery out there. And that is perhaps that's not for us, but it is one of the things about retention. If you can't use the whiz bang what's it in Wales, you'll go and use the whiz bang what's it elsewhere.
I think that's a really current issue for scholarship. What we're hearing is that the education accreditation based on a digital approach, not an analog approach, which will be exactly what you said, that people will never have done that. Actually, working through the digital, but it is already an issue that affects recruitment.
There is a tension in this, because black holes weren't discovered by computers. They were discovered by a human brain looking at the output from a computer. And so, there is always that tension And as we know, the sense check on using machine thinking is not another machine. It is, it is human. So I think there's a governance question in general that's going to come into all of these work plans about the use of technologies and machine thinking in particular. And also, how do we max out on communication and digital you've already got? You know, those are, to what extent do you need to do face to face all the time?
A lot of the advances are being embraced by everybody, with you, particularly the receptor science of cancer and genomics and all of that sort of work that's going on to develop new products. So that isn't the work thing that worries people. It's this predictive stuff that is, I think, is an opportunity that can be considered as a threat at the same time by a lot of clinicians. When you first started heading our way, there was a lot of concern about what's going to happen to my job, type of thing. But what we'll find is that that interface with, like you just described, with black holes, I think will develop, and we've got to have a degree of patience for our clinical bodies to see, okay, AI does help us with this. It helps us with this pathology screening. It helps us with this imaging screening and diagnostics. And ultimately, I think it'll give better service to patients. And it takes time for that,
So
for the human brain to start
if
accepting
you
that.
want to see this played out, listen to the Day programme yesterday when they were talking about reducing the postal service to 3 days. And already how that is actually imaginable. It is a different, we have to move along. We have to see as far into the future as we can without shutting any doors. But the regulators are a key part of this, as are the royal colleges.
And people like NICE.
Yeah, it needs to be done with people, and that's what I think is the great strength of this. We're doing this with people, but I'm sure that the governance of new systems also needs to be thought through very carefully. Okay, so look, it's a very cheap shot. This one, we're asked to endorse the National Diagnostics Workforce Plan. I think we should recognise the challenge. I think we should encourage our support and approach to this workforce plan. And so I'm asking you to endorse the National Diagnostic Workforce Plan as a basis of developing a prioritised costed plan. Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to go on to agenda item 3.2. I think we've already done quite a bit, which is the NHS Health and Social Care AI Artificial Intelligence briefing paper. I need to declare an interest because I sit on the AI Commission for Wales. So, Sian, is it you doing this again?
It is. However, the paper is heavily written by Craig, who's our assistant director, and given the board's previous interest and the impact that AI has on lots of our workforce plans in our direction, this paper sets out a bit of a position statement of some of the wider work that's going on and some of the landscape in NHS Wales, particularly around the AI, and then focuses in a little bit more about our plans and our role in that. So the paper is quite wide and gives a view of AI in general, and then focuses back in, so it's more for information and position and setting. I know you will have read it in detail, so I'm keen to go through it, but to give some highlights really around some of the evidence of what's happening already. We often talk about AI being in the future. I think that the paper is able to demonstrate that some of this is now and is happening, is impacting the way we deliver services and the people that we have in roles and the impact on them. So section 2.1 does give some real examples of AI being used right across the different landscape in NHS Wales. And then it does describe some of that AI and regulation and the ethics and governance. So there are several organisations that are looking at this and in some respects are catching up to a very fast moving pace around the development of AI. And then more locally within NHS Wales, the paper describes the AI landscape review led by Public Health around the context and the recommendations to maximise the adoption and consider some of the barriers. And it's actually that review that led to the commission that the chairman has just mentioned around taking the front foot and leading with Welsh Government and key partners across addressing some of those areas of concern or future direction for AI. The group is now meeting on a regular basis and it is focusing in the first instance on the work plan and working that through, but more local to HAW, we've been making good progress, and actually the paper describes the AI fellowship, which is actually taken a lot of progress in a short amount of time, and we've been working with NHS England for the first time to have AI fellows in Wales, and we can announce that the recruitment of that is progressing as we speak, and we've had some really good candidates and potentially some really good projects. So I think that'll be a landmark for NHS Wales to be able to say we've got the fellows. I'm not sure I can disclose that yet, it's still in process, but at least
At least.
A good cohort. I will come. It's in progress, so we'll come back and confirm the answer around that. But we're looking to it for 2 projects in the first instance. So they will be fun. And then the AI studies, and we are, as you will have seen through some of the work in the early iterations of the IMTP, and one of the core things that we will be looking at next year is understanding the current landscape of the education and skills development for AI. And again, we've gone out for an expression of interest for clinicians to come with us and work through that in a similar vein to what they did with the genomics programme. So what's out there, how does it need to look, what is that, and what does it mean for HAW? So next year's plan will feature heavily on that. And then, of course, using the tools around Copilot and the 365 offering about looking at how we improve internally and maximise use. So it's a broad church of information on what we're doing, and further progress reports will be coming through our IMTP. But happy to take any questions.
So can I just I have this view that what a cunning plan would look like is to jointly sponsor fellows in AI with the Royal Colleges. I think unless we do things together, unless we start to influence together, we will always have more tardy elements and elements that we believe there's more risk that can appear suddenly. So I would suggest that there should also involve management trainees, planners, and I certainly think that AI should be a fundamental part of the leadership program.
It is.
Yeah.
So that the clinical leadership program has next.
No, we don't mean the clinical leadership program.
The general.
I mean the general leadership program, because I think the impact on this, on planning, on governance, on assurance is massive, and the public need to be assured. We know what it's like if it takes one clinician to say doing that is a bad idea. Yeah, we need to have the leadership together, and I can't think of anything better than actually training. And the biggest issue that's nagging me in the back of my head is, if everything else is going to be doing AI, what are our expectations about AI in training, in education and training? Not what they're being trained in, but the methodologies we're using to train. And that definitely is linked back to the Royal Colleges and to the regulators. So I know that in academic works at MSc and PhD. In certain universities, if you haven't used AI, then you seem not to have done a good job. So Generation Z and Generation Z Plus will have a greater understanding of this than the leadership in many organisations, including the NHS. So those, for me, that's a really big issue that we will need to think about. Whereas I learned anatomy by rote, it may be that the future, your actual understanding of the anatomy will be very, very limited, but your access to the knowledge and the way it can be used will be totally different. So I think we have to be, influencing at a UK-wide basis what the future training will look like for all the healthcare professions in order to enable modern methodologies to be adopted quickly. Sorry.
No, that's really helpful, and I think we've started to touch on that with some of the Royal Colleges. We have the round tables with the Royal Colleges, we've had 2 of those, and actually we've started the conversation around some of the technology, and Alex in particular asked that question of them, and so it was the opportunities there to follow that up with more open space, and I think the IMTP piece of work with a clinical lead in that area, they can facilitate and support some of those.
Perhaps this is a piece of work that the Academy and those could take forward across the Royal Colleges. That I would not leave out the nursing.
No,
I would not leave any of the Royal Colleges out. This is something we could do together and discover together.
I think it is a huge discovery, and it's changing lots of professions. And I think we just started to understand that. Case study last week where it's unlikely that any future lawyer will need to know case law because they'll just be able to
Just get a barrister. Jim.
Yeah, just a couple of brief ones, Chair, if I could. It felt like a sort of patchwork quilt in at the moment in terms of where the bits are, and some bits going at different paces. And on my shoulder, I can feel Heidi with her fax machine down in Swansea, and the gap between this and at the forefront of AI and people actually not having the equipment at the other ends, I think is something that shouldn't be forgotten. The second thing is the paper was about health and social care, but I couldn't see much in there on social care. Where is Social Care Wales on this issue? And if we go back to the prevention agenda, which is one of our objectives going forward, I didn't feel that there was quite enough in terms of keeping people out and how AI and the technology can be out in the community. There's a little bit too focused, on health and the usual secondary. So
Yeah, so in relation to social care, they are on the commission and they are leading pieces of work, and maybe some areas not as advanced, but we can take that forward and share opportunities and our advances, particularly around the education, with colleagues around that. Your point about equipment is really actually well made, and I think it's a delicate balance, because going back to the diagnostic conversation, we currently have difficulties in NHS Wales on our limbs and our packs and our RIS systems, which are very, very, very old technology, and the investment required to move off those platforms. And unless we've got fit for purpose modern IT systems, we won't be able to do any of this. So it will continue to be a patchwork in small places unless we invest in infrastructure to be able to do that. So I think that recognition is something that my colleagues and digital directors right across Wales are fighting to not to see this as an add-on, that is actually an essential part of how we deliver care for a modern NHS, and I think some of that hasn't always been the case for the way that we've done investment. So unless we've got that in place, we're not going to benefit from any of the potential. On the prevention agenda, I think agreed, but this was just a flavour that there's lots of examples and case studies where prevention is a huge part of and sort of risk certification and individuals using some even sort of wearables, and so it may not be the high end of AI, but there's lots of opportunities. I think some of the projects that we take forward as an exec team, something we mentioned yesterday was potentially asking for digital projects for our Wickletouch maybe to be working on and encouraging those kind of projects, which could have a prevention agenda actually is good opportunity.
Ruth, Martina, then
Just spot on, by what Chancellor said about the need for investment, and the potential balance between what's needed to invest and the benefits of this, whether the Commission is doing any work on the economic round.
So the Commission released a paper, I could share actually with the board where the roles and the infographic around the role of its impact in radiology, and that was based on an economic research study of how that could impact. So we can share that, but benefit of AI, but didn't go quite as far as the impact and investment in IT systems. So I think that's.
I think we would need to be guided by that.
Tina,
I'll try and be brief. There's quite a few comments that I wanted to make. I think it would be interesting to have an exploration of the definition of care, because when it looks in some of the appendices, it talks about improved patient experience, care, and it said care within their own homes. I get a lot of this about the physical elements, not about the psychological and mental component parts of disease processes, the effect of some of the conditions that it might be addressing. So it'd be interesting to see where the emotional support, because we talk about the whole aspect of a human, not just the things that you can get out of it. And I hope you don't take this as negative, you know, the AI tick box thing to say, yeah, we've done all the investigation. The other issue also is that it talks about clinicians not being in control of decision making, because it'd be preempted by the defined processes that actually come up with it. So again, the regulatory functions in relation to that and the support mechanism. I think, you know, I'm not saying it's not a way that it's going to go, but I do think that that has to be carried with the accountability, because it also comments on the reduction in management of care and decision being made. So what does that mean for an NHS delivery services, and where does that accountability and responsibility lie? So when you look at it, the workforce according to this will change dramatically in 50 years. You know, you think everybody will be done AI. But I do think that there is an emotional aspect, and that's what I mean about care, because the individual decision-making process. Are we talking about people sitting in a room just reading a computer and ringing a patient and saying this is what's happened to you? Which means you don't need clinicians anymore, technically. And I'm not being facetious. At the end of the day, if you've got a machine that does it all, what does that actually mean? So where does the client or the patient actually place themselves in relation to, is that the only outcome? If an AI outcome says that's what it is there alternative? And it would suggest that you don't need specialists in anything either. So it's quite scary on one hand, but it would be helpful to know what the AI definition of care is.
I can share a paper about digital hospitals in China. And it fundamentally answers, the answer is you have a hybrid system. And the Deloitte have done a massive review of it. And it's you have a hybrid system, so you balance that element of hands-on personalized care against technologically driven big number, big crunching or complex care in a different way.
But if you look at the articles that you've given us to read, it doesn't mention that at all. It's all about the issues that raise great.
I think it's like demonstrate the art of the possible, the possibility, what it's not, then is the care model. I think this is about the possibility of the technology, how we choose to then implement that into a model of care, will be a co-design piece of work, wouldn't it, between clinician and the delivery of the service, and how we want that workforce to look. Just because you can doesn't mean that we have to always take that model forward. I think video consulting would be a prime example of that. You know, everyone could have gone to that. That isn't the experience that we've done for lots of mixed reasons, coming back to that mixed model, I think, around some of that. So I think we need to design a care system, health and care system, going back to about care, that is maximising the opportunity. Go back to the regulation piece, understanding the impact of some of the things.
Okay, Donna, then Alex.
Just thinking, you know, if we were able to transport ourselves, you know, 15, 20 years into the future and look back, it would be unrecognisable from where we are now, and this is where we are going in the future, and some very exciting and interesting projects were outlined in that paper. But I was also, you know, the section of that paper that was also key is around the regulation, and not losing sight of the fact that, you know, we can build inherent biases into some of these things, which would be perpetuated and perhaps more difficult to spot and see. So it's really key to see that kind of ethical and oversight happening, so that we don't inadvertently create some of the issues that we reference with increasing rates of C-sections for a certain demographic, you know, ethnic group, etc. So I think it's really, really key. And that holding on to that, a lot of what happens is done, as it said there, with clean data, and we all know that, as it said, real life data is often very messy, and it won't necessarily be able to do that, but exciting, challenging, and really we've got a role with it, which I think we're really, really pleased. So yeah, thank you for an interesting paper. Thanks to those bits.
Yeah, I think just, you know, to emphasise what John has said there, you know, they're almost rhetorical questions at the moment, aren't they? Because they are big questions that are facing the whole of society, not just the healthcare system, not just the NHS, and not just the low less than HAW. And I suppose that's one of the points, is just being clear, have a role in this, but this is not all down to us. We're a partner in this, and so as Don said, we've got a role with it in conjunction with other companies. And you know, see where this takes us, but with all of those necessary controls around it. I think for me, that, you know, what's really interesting when you look at how this is being developed in other systems is it's plugged very clearly in the workforce wellbeing space. So this is about how you avoid burnout in the workforce. And I think, you know, that is a really important thing, because this isn't about how you substitute for the workforce. It's actually about how you avoid workforce burnout, and how you allow your staff to go home at the end of the day, so that they've done a really good job caring for patients to the quality that they want to deliver, without doing a lot of stuff that actually machine learning could actually have done for them, so that they're doing and they can do. I think, you know, that's a really, really helpful way of looking at this when we're looking at some of the challenges we've got in our health system, and, you know, really approaching it from that perspective as HAW, I think, is part of the key to how we can sort of embed this as a helpful part of the system. Doing the right things in the way that we want it to do. So I don't want to go debate, but I think, you know, we just need to go back to what's our role in this.
So I think we've done more than note. I think the board have shown a real interest in this area. We've recognised some of the challenges and recognised some of the opportunities. We're not in the paper, and we'll keep coming back to this. You said a terrible thing then, Donna, terribly complex thing. You said if we think now into the future, it would be unrecognisable. Do you think someone born in 1956 would still be able to recognise the NHS as it is now?
Yes.
I think there's far too much that's recognisable now. That was in 1956. So in terms of bias, there's an internal bias already built in the opposite direction about the fear of change. And understandably, so the way to actually promote this agenda is, to what extent will this make things better for people? And to what extent will it make things easier and more manageable for those that are providing care? I think I'm coming to the conclusion that asking the right questions is one of the big things we could be doing in terms of our brief. Because we will never answer this on our own, neither should we. We should be doing this as part of an influencing with others. The partnership idea, I think I'd like us to really explore that, about how we invest our money and others' time in getting somewhere where we can get a considered opinion and permission to move forwards, even if it is only baby step. But I would hate to think we can still recognise the services as they are now in 15 years' time, because I think we'll have missed the boat.
So 15 years it is, as you say, is not that long really.
No education cycle.
Yes, but even so, actually, the key to this as well is that we talk about it, how we bring our workforce actually forward, the public are the key to actually the delivery of this. Because if they take time, you know, to just to this arena as well, and therefore, you know, that could put a bit of a delay as well.
Okay. Just to nail it for you, Sean. This thing, on its own, linked to an iPhone, takes a waiting list of 6 months down to instant. It's an ECG machine. It's not brilliant, but it's good enough to tell you whether or not you got AF or not. Yeah? You don't want to know whether you've got, you know, some kind of weird non-pathological block. You want to know if you've got AF. So it's the precision about the question, and then what it doesn't answer, knowing what it does and what it doesn't do. And that, I think, is where we could be very helpful in training people in a different way of thinking, not in absolutes. Okay, thank you very much. Can I suggest at this juncture we take a short break? Yeah. Can I suggest we take a 15-minute break now? Yeah. Yeah. We'll take 15 minutes now. So by my calculation, it is 12:30. We will reconvene at 12:45. Thank you.